Alright, so that empty space in front of the iris is called the anterior chamber, and I'm just outlining it here. So that's going to be our number 7, the anterior chamber. So down here, 7, anterior chamber. The job of the anterior chamber is that it's just an open space to hold a fluid. So it is the space between, what do you call that clear outer covering of the eye right there? The cornea, and what do we call the colored part of the eye? Iris. So its anterior chamber is between the cornea and the iris. It doesn't really have a huge job. Its job is just to contain this fluid called aqueous humor. Aqueous humor. So the anterior chamber has aqueous humor, a liquid. Notice the shape of the cornea is convex, so it's bulging outwards, and there's a fluid behind it. What would happen if that fluid were to disappear for some reason? It would become concave, or it would flatten out because there's no fluid pushing the cornea outward. So the aqueous humor is pretty important. You have to have a proper shape or else the cornea can't do its job. Number 8 is kind of tricky to see. Behind the iris, but in front of the lens, there's a gap right there called the posterior chamber. So behind the iris, but in front of the lens. So I'm just going to draw a line from back here for number 8. So behind the iris, but in front of the lens. And what's the opposite of anterior? Posterior. So that is our posterior chamber. It is the space between the iris and the lens. And the iris itself has a hole. It has a pupil in it, so that fluid that's in front of it is also going to be the same fluid in the back of the iris. So it contains aqueous humor as well. Underneath number 7, the label number 7, we're going to add a line inside here. Actually, maybe we should, let's do it right here. Inside of the anterior chamber is that aqueous humor, so I'm just going to add a line for inside of the chamber. So number 9 is going to be the aqueous humor. And this is the fluid that keeps the cornea convex. Without it, the cornea would kind of cave inward. And since it is a fluid, its job is to also circulate oxygen and nutrients. Real quick with your partner, can you guys figure out, the eyeball is made up of how many distinct layers? What do we call each layer of the eyeball? See if you guys can figure that out.
2, 3.
How many layers of the eye are there technically? Three. The outermost layer is called the outer tunic. Middle one's called the middle tunic. And the innermost one is called the inner tunic. Simple, right? So we're going to add a heading for inner tunic. It is the layer with all of the nervous tissue in it. I'm going to use a yellow, so if you have yellow or a light orange, grab that. So for the inner tunic, I'm using yellow or light orange to color. The innermost layer here is called the retina, and you can see in the picture they're kind of folding the retina down. So we're just going to use yellow to color in the retina here. The retina layer is the layer with all the nervous tissue. So when light shines into your eye, this is the layer that will actually interpret that light signal and tell your brain what the image, or it'll tell your brain that there is an image in front of you. You guys heard of like retina displays or retina scans?
Yeah. That's like computer screens, right?
Huh?
Like the computer screens, like.
Yeah, like on Apple phones and computers, they're like, oh, it has a retina display. It just means it has a lot, it's really bright, it has a lot of color, and so it appeals, and your retina is a spot in your eye that interprets light and color. So it's just saying like, oh, it's really bright, it's really colorful. That's what it means to me anyways. It looks better. And your retina will feel very pleased because it gets to interpret all this data. Actually, do you think your retina gets tired from staring at colors and lights too long?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Have you guys ever sat in front of a computer for way too many hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, so your retina does get tired from interpreting signals all day.
It's kind of like zone out. You know, like staring at it, it's like not focused.
They die as you get older, like everything. But they do start running out of proteins to tell you that you're seeing colors or light. So that's number 10, retina.
So like colorblind is just like the retina not functioning?
There are things on the retina that determine light and color. Did anybody do lecture number 4? What are the two things that determine light or color? Do you remember? Cones and rods. So if you're missing one of those, or some of those, then it will misinterpret the color, or it won't be able to interpret the color. So number 10 down here is retina. I'm going to underline that yellow because we colored it yellow. Color coordination. So the retina's job is to convert light into nerve impulses. There's a specific spot on your retina that has more cones and more rods than any other part of the retina. And so that spot on your retina is able to interpret light signals the best. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my black pen to outline this spot on the retina is able to interpret light signals the best. And that's going to be our number 11. So when light comes into the eye, it goes past the cornea, past the aqueous humor, through the pupil, past the lens, and the job of the lens is to make sure that light goes straight to this spot here. If it goes anywhere else, it might have a harder time interpreting what that signal is. So number 11 is our macula lutea. So macula lutea is the area on the retina with the highest concentration of rods. And rods are structures that can interpret light signals. That's why I was asking people today, whoever's in Spanish, how do you say light in Spanish? Luz, right? So it's the same root word. And for Italian, luce. And in French, seriously, does anybody take French here? So it's the same root word. It means light, right? So light has to go to the macula lutea because that's the best spot for you to interpret light. In the middle of the macula lutea, so I'm going to use a pencil for this one. In the middle of the macula lutea, there's another spot. So I'm just going to, it almost looks like a target symbol. So there's another spot inside of the macula lutea that has all the cones. So color is best interpreted by this spot here. So I'm going to put a number 12 there. So number 12 for this spot inside of the macula. So inside of the macula, dead center, is called the fovea centralis. What does that sound like, centralis? Central, that means middle. The fovea centralis is in the middle of the macula. So center of the macula. It has the highest concentration of cones. So there are structures in the fovea that will interpret color differences. And we'll talk more about that after our stretch break.